Gene Segura, Mean Gene Segura, is now officially official that he is a Marlin. Yes, sir, Gene. Signs on the dotted line. All physicals were fine. And the corresponding move has been made. We are going to be digging into that. Plus, further rumors, more rumors, substantial rumors that the Marlins are in the hunt for a veteran starting pitcher. All on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins, baby. I am your host, of course, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on Twitter at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, hello, good morning, top of the morning, early pod, immediate reaction pod. Hit subscribe, leave a review, why not? If you are then thinking about, is there a YouTube show? Yes, there is. Head over to YouTube, you will see. It is bright and sunny here in the UK. Gymshark hoodie on, of course. Brand loyalty is so high here in the Pratt household. But guys, Gene Segura, officially a Miami Marlin. Yes, sir. And all of the speculation, all of the rumors, what are the Marlins going to do? Are they dropping a trade? Who are they DFAing? Which reliever is going to go? They made the corresponding move, and it was one that I don't think I heard anyone talk about. I know I certainly didn't talk about it. So it's funny, this Gene Segura signing, there's two elements to it, right? The first element being, firstly, we have to say Segura, he's a good hitter. He's a good hitter and he's a good fielder. It's a good signing for the Marlins, as I've said on previous episodes. But it's funny how they make one good signing and it creates more questions than answers. We don't know where he's going to play. That's been a whole string. And then we don't know how they're going to create the 40-man spot. The Marlins then make the move on the 40-man spot, and everyone starts to lose their minds. This is so Marlins. The one thing we should say about Charles Leblanc is Craig Mish talked about it previously to say that the Marlins weren't really high on him. And, well, I guess that has come home to roost on this one. So let's get into it then, guys. In the first part of the episode anyway. The breaking news overnight, for me anyway, I think it dropped relatively US-friendly, let's say, East Coast-friendly. I think it dropped just around the time when the Fish Stripes live show went. So the guys dug into the news, like had immediate reaction to the news, which I've listened back to. I thought it was a great episode, and go and check that out. It was a lot of fun. I read the news at 5 a.m. UK time when I woke up and checked Twitter, I guess, just by habit. And saw that Segura was signed and official, knew that they had to have done something, realized it was Charles Leblanc. Interesting one. So my initial reaction, and I think that is in line with maybe the Fish Stripes guys too, was why Charles Leblanc? The reality was he came up in 2022 when needed. Obviously, Jazz Chisholm was hurt a good portion of the year, as was Joey Wendell. Miggy Rowe was struggling. Brian Anderson's shoulder. They had a ton of injuries. Charles Leblanc came up, and certainly at the start of his major league career, the first stretch, he was really nice. Really nice in terms of like contact hitter. Not a ton of power, but, sprays it around. Just looked as solid, decent major league player that can, from a Marlins perspective, we certainly haven't seen that in the past few years. When we've had to go down a tier into the depth pool, we've had guys coming up that clearly look overmatched and don't look like major leaguers, and in reality haven't become major leaguers either with the Marlins or other organizations. So with Charles Leblanc, I would say what he's put on tape, what his numbers are saying, is there's something to work with there. And I think it's fair to say that we did slightly tail off right at the back end of the year, and so overall, his numbers, when you look at it, he had 104 OPS plus, 723 OPS itself, 4 homers, but he hit 2 63. Played all around the diamond, second base, third base, and first base as well. A Rule 5, a minor league Rule 5 guy. So the Marlins literally plucked him out of nowhere, performed well at AAA, and got his call, and did well at the major league level. Now DFA'd, he's still got his 3 minor league option years remaining because he was added to the 40-man and thus the 26, 28-man, and was never optioned back down. So he still has 3 minor league option years still in play. So that leads you to believe that there's a really good chance that someone will likely trade for Leblanc. Just adding some depth. Why would you not? And actually, this is the funny thing, and I think where my head was at was, you've got a guy that came up, performed pretty much, I mean, barely any Marlins hitters hit over 260. I appreciate the sample size was relatively small for Leblanc, but not many of them were doing that. It's 156 at bats, hitting 260 with 3 minor league options and position versatility. It kind of leaves you scratching your head thinking, why have the Marlins moved on from him? Yes, Jordan Groshans is on the roster. They've had to add Javier Edwards as well onto the roster. So I understand that from a 40-man perspective. But as we know, it isn't just about what you're starting 9 or starting, 15 or whatever it might be. You're going to need depth because the injuries are going to come. Pretty much the whole of the infield, from a Marlins perspective, last year was hurt for prolonged periods. So there's going to be a need for a versatile guy like Charles Leblanc. Let me just be clear, though. I don't see Leblanc as a game-changing player. He is not going to take the Marlins, in my opinion, at this point, to another level and push them on. I see him just as a nice, versatile depth piece with 3 minor league options and major league minimum contract. Fits the brief for a team like the Marlins, right? It fits the brief for a team like, for example, the Tampa Bay Rays or the Cleveland Guardians. Those kind of teams that can see value in guys, they're on league minimum, and they'll go and pluck them out. What this made me think of was Harold Ramirez type of things. And I think the guys on Fish Stripes talked about it too, or at least one of the, maybe the listeners did, to say that the Harold Ramirez move at that point felt a bit funky. I don't think, maybe we had a similar reaction to Harold that we've had with Leblanc. And then, lo and behold, Harold Ramirez ends up like hitting cleanup for the Tampa Bay Rays that, go on to make the postseason multiple years and year after year. So, it's a different organization, the Rays, the way they operate. But for me, I'm still just left scratching my head about this whole Leblanc situation. It doesn't seem to make a ton of sense, particularly in light of the fact that Miguel Rojas and Joey Wendell, both of them, will be free agents after this year. So what happens next year when we need some depth? And what happens if Groshans doesn't pan out? These kind of questions. The small sample size for Charles Leblanc, I think, was encouraging. The versatility, encouraging. The minor league option years, encouraging. Maybe he's going to form part of a bigger deal. I don't know, but he's clearly not a marquee name that's going to really bring you anything huge back in terms of offensive production at the major league level. Like right now, it's going to be hard to get an impact stick back for Charles Leblanc, clearly. Maybe you could flip it for a reliever. I don't know. But when I was thinking about this, surely there was a 1 or 2 relievers that were on the 40-man that you could have easily moved if you wanted to retain Leblanc. The Marlins seemingly weren't as high on him as perhaps the fans were. At the end of the day, that's what they're paid to do. We're just fans, and we look at the numbers, and we see a guy hitting 260. We get excited because last year all we had was guys hitting 220 and below. So he was one of the best hitters. Apart from Brian De La Cruz, probably Charles Leblanc was the second best hitter for the Marlins in the second half, with 3 minor league options and league minimum. We've DFA'd him. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Yes, the infield is crowded. I completely understand that it is a crowded situation, but you could easily just option Leblanc down to the minor leagues. You don't have to have him on the major league roster. You will need him anyway, because someone will pull a hammy, hurt a hamstring, tweak a calf, whatever it is. Someone will be hurt for a sustained period because it happens every year. And also, probably at the deadline, with Wendell and Miggy, if things go sideways, and the offseason still has to play out, there's still moves to be made. But let's say Wendell and Miguel Rojas are both still on the roster going into opening day. The reality is, by the deadline, if the Marlins are out of it, which probably they will be, because not being pessimistic, just being realistic, that is the situation. The Marlins are really in it right into late July. Miguel Rojas and Joey Wendell will be traded. They will be at that point if they're out of it, which they likely will be. And thus, where's your depth then? I'm left scratching my head on Charles Leblanc. I think the fan base is, I don't think he's a needle mover. He's not an impact player. I completely understand that. But we always need depth. Teams always need depth. And what we've seen thus far was relatively encouraging. Bit of a head scratcher, but if you're thinking about betting, there is no better place to look than our guys and friends over at Bet Online, baby. And I don't think anyone had Charles Leblanc being the guy DFA'd, but betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. All the latest odds and trends. Every league out there, professional or amateurs. You got the NFL, of course. College bowl season's just wrapped up. Basketball going on. The English Premier League, of course. You've got it all. betonline.net. It is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today. Say that again. Or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online where the game starts. Obviously need another cup of coffee this morning. Struggling to speak on the Bet Online, would you believe? So, I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. Let me know. Maybe as we dwell on this news and the shock factor starts to settle on LeBlanc, we'll maybe look at things differently. It was interesting to see some of the comments and thoughts on Marlin's Twitter and Craig Mish's thoughts around it, which we're always bang on. A lot of the same guy. Is this a big move? Is this a big deal? Probably not. But to the fans and to me, I just don't think it makes a ton of sense. Nevertheless, let's move on. Because the Marlins, more rumors, rumors I think is perhaps the right word still, but more rumors around a veteran starting pitcher. I think I saw one went off the board yesterday anyway in Wade Miley. But the Marlins were linked with Johnny Cueto a few weeks back. We then get a Ken Rosenthal report. I say report. We got a tweet from Ken, which was a bit interesting, I would say, because Ken is more of a reporter after the fact or a breaking news guy rather than a rumors guy. So I don't know if he was hacked. He probably wasn't. But he was putting out there to say the Marlins and Padres particularly remain interested in Johnny Cueto. The Reds also sniffing around that as well. I spoke about it with Sean Barrett a few weeks back. Johnny Cueto, as a Marlin, makes a ton of sense for various reasons. And then being a veteran guy, been around for years, literally been around for years, had a nice year in 22. Likely he's at the kind of twilight of his career. So there's and the Marlins have a very young staff knocking around. And so he can add a lot of value there in terms of helping nurture some of the talent, starting to play a little bit into that role. But again, for Cueto, there'd be a rotation spot available and open to him, perhaps. He definitely had the nice 22. The question then comes of, are you looking at either the Padres or the Marlins? And where are you likely to go? That's down to Cueto. But clearly, you would assume that someone that maybe in their last year or two at the major league level now before retirement would likely want to target a contender and one where they have packed out ballparks, and have got a very fun offensive team. Clearly, the Padres on the West Coast, spent a lot of time on the West Coast himself. Feels like a nice fit. The Padres are in search of a fifth starter. Talked with, or we had a crossover with Locked On Padres a few weeks back, and they were talking about it and seeing Pablo Lopez as a potential five in the rotation, a fifth starter. That's how good the rotation is projected to be if healthy there in San Diego. And so for the Padres, they haven't been afraid to spend money. And so for me, Cueto feels like a really nice fit there in San Diego. It is also a great fit with the Marlins. However, the Marlins will likely be outbid by San Diego. Their need will likely be a slightly different need. But one thing that I think was really interesting yesterday, thinking about this, is the current depth chart from a starting perspective right now, without any trades, and the fact that we can rule out Max Meyer for the whole year. Sixto is unclear. So those two guys that are both on the 40-man, it's unclear well, it's not unclear for Max. He's going to be missing all of 23. Sixto, who knows? But when you actually look at the rotation depth, I mean, after Braxton Garrett, and okay, you can definitely put Uri Perez in that rotation depth, and in effect becomes the next man up. But if you look at the 6 guys, including Braxton Garrett and Trevor Rogers, with no trades, then you've got Chichi Gonzalez, who, let's be honest, is probably not going to be doing too much and deliver too much on the field based on what we saw last year. Then you're into Uri Perez, which, I mean, we'd all be very excited about, clearly, but the Marlins will be careful with him. After Uri, there's definitely quite a significant drop-off. You're back into your Brian Hoeings, etc. Dan Castano is still on the roster, 0 options. Likely will start as a long man, but could flex into the rotation if required. He's done it before. So, it does start to thin out. That's the point we're making. It's the point that Eli was making on the Fish Stripes Live last night, that if everyone's healthy and then there's no trades made, then the Marlins have an abundance of pitching right now. And maybe Cueto is a little bit of a luxury. Clearly, if people are hurt or they trade from their rotation depth, then that changes things. They do have players coming up, coming down the pipe. Jake Eder was really progressing before his Tommy John. We'll have to see how that recovery goes. Uri Perez obviously looks to me like he will make his major league debut at some point in 2023. Dax Folden is also trending in the right direction also. So they have guys coming, which is why Cueto, if they do indeed end up trading one of their starters right now, is a really nice bridge guy, just helping you get to the next year when the next wave of guys are around, which includes Uri Perez, Dax Fulton, Jake Eder, Max Meyer coming back. What's happening with Sixto? There's tons of them. But where they're at right now, they're a little bit on rocky ground. The depth is tested because the minor league guys, the top talent in the minor leagues, still a touch away. Some injuries have hurt them with Max and Sixto. And they're obviously looking to upgrade the offense as well. And that may need them to move one of the starting pitchers from right now. Pablo Lopez, clearly the big name that's being talked about. Interesting, we saw someone reporting yesterday that the Marlins haven't entertained any conversations or trade discussions around Edward Cabrera, which is contradictory in some ways to one of the other reports around the Rockies and Marlins talking about Cabrera, Brendan Rodgers. I don't know if in the same deal, but I'm not surprised the Rockies were interested in Cabrera. He pitched really well in Coors there, but for me, I see if health is okay for Cabrera, he is absolutely Sandy Alcantara 2.0, and for me, the Marlins absolutely should be trying to hold on to him. Clearly Pablo Lopez is the one to look to move because of just the 2 years of control. Long-winded way of saying Johnny Cueto and the Marlins could be a really nice fit. The reality is, if the Padres are really interested, they'll get a deal done with Cueto because they'll make it happen financially for him. It's an attractive team to go to on the West Coast. It makes a ton of sense. If the Padres weren't interested, then I would say absolutely you would fit the Marlins profile. But I would say it would be subject to making a move in terms of one of the starting pitchers. It just wouldn't make a ton of sense to add in Cueto at 5 to 10 million, and 10 million feels a lot. Let's say 5 to 8 million, and then you kind of have to, put Trevor Rogers, Braxton Garrett down in AAA. Could be useful, but equally with a deficient offense, they need to be pooling their resources in perhaps different ways. And so Cueto, nice if the Marlins make the move with the starting pitcher. However, if the Padres go all in, I think there's a chance he can get it. They'll get a deal done, and the Marlins will be gazumped as usual. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This was a reaction pod to the news that Jean Segura is a Marlin. Great signing for the Marlins. I'm very excited to see Jean. He will be wearing number 9. All those Jazz Chisholm 2 jerseys remain current. There was a worry that maybe Jazz would flex his number to 3, but Jazz stays as 2. Segura as 9. The Marlins DFA Charles Leblanc. They have 7 days to try and make a deal and get something of value back for Charles Leblanc. We wish him well for the future. I thought he was a nice surprise, a nice addition. He equally tested all of us linguistically, trying to work out, was it LeBlanc? Was it Leblanc? Nevertheless, he is DFA'd, and that is going to be someone else's problem moving forwards. The Marlins remain in on Johnny Cueto. Clearly, if Ken Rosenthal is reporting that, then the interest must be relatively strong from the Marlins and the Padres. Gut feel is if the Padres want their man, they will get their man. If Cueto wants to go to Miami, looks like it's a good fit. Guys, I'll be back as soon as there's any further news, which likely could be in the coming days. See you soon.